Chapter 2. The Donkey Speaks. I'm a donkey, and I lived a very long time ago, over 1,000 years ago, in the desert with my owner, Lady Halima Sa'diyah. Halima was a wet nurse. That meant her job was to look after other people's babies. She would feed them her milk instead of the mother's own milk. In those days, you couldn't buy baby milk in bottles like we do now. The Arab people who used to live at the time would hand their newborn babies over to a wet nurse who would take them away from the hustle and bustle of the city to live with them in the quiet, tranquil desert. Halima had a tough life. She was very poor and very unlucky. She used to live in a tent in the desert where there was very little rain, very little greenery, and very little goodness. So this meant that me, the donkey, was just skin and bones. One day, Halima brought me out the tent. I was really excited. Maybe Lady Halima is taking me outside to graze with the sheep so I can eat some yummy grass. But instead, Halima climbed on my back with her tiny little baby that wouldn't stop crying. Harith, her husband, got on top of the old camel, and we all set off through the desert. The desert was really hot, and I plodded on with great difficulty. I was so tired, I hardly had the energy to move. What made things worse was Halima's tiny baby wouldn't stop crying. He was so hungry, but every time Halima held him up to her breast to feed him some of her milk, she didn't find a single drop. Harith asked her, "How are you going to breastfeed another child when you could hardly have enough milk to breastfeed your own?" Halima answered, "When I bring another child, its parents will pay me enough money so that I can eat and become strong again, and once I'm nourished, I'll have enough milk for the both of them. But the most important thing is that I find a rich family who are able to pay me a lot of money for this child." As we crossed the desert, I wanted to know where we were, so I asked the old camel. She knew the desert paths much better than me. "We are going to Mecca," she said. When I heard the name Mecca, I became very excited and suddenly found the energy to continue walking on. No, I began running fast. How? I don't know, but I did. I ran so fast that we got there before all the other wet nurse families, the ones that had left before us. Halima was very pleased and she thanked me because now she had the chance to choose a wealthy baby before the other wet nurses came back and took them all away. Halima went from house to house, searching here and there. After what seemed like a very long time, she returned to us, sad and depressed. I overheard her telling her husband, "It looks like we're going to have to go home empty-handed. Only this time, we'll be tired and hungry too." I felt really sorry for Halima. None of the children's parents wanted to give their child to her because she looked so poor and so weak. How could she look after their child? Halima took a little break to rest, and when she was ready, she returned a second time to search for a child again. After some time, we saw her running towards us happily, calling out to her husband in joy, "Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah." She'd finally found a child. As she approached us, I could smell a sweet fragrance, like the smell of expensive musk perfume. It was coming from this new child that she was now holding in her arms. He was a sweet baby, a quiet baby, and as beautiful as the glittering moon. Harith looked down at the baby and couldn't help but smile. He asked her excitedly, "Whose child is he, and what's his name?" Can you guess who this baby was and what his name might be? "His name is Muhammad," the son of Abdullah. The father died while Muhammad was still in his mother's belly. His grandfather is a great nobleman and a leader of Quraysh, Abdul Muttalib, and his mother is Amina, daughter of Wahab, and she is one of the most honorable ladies of all the Arabs, from one of their most respected families. Harith cheerfully helped Halima on top of me, while she held the baby Muhammad and her own child. Do you remember the one who wouldn't stop crying? Well, even he seemed to be happy and quiet now. Harith climbed on top of his old camel, and with that we left. Strangely, I felt myself walking, no running, at quite a pace. I passed by all those wet nurses who had left Mecca with us, and soon I'd passed by those who'd left Mecca before us. I felt strong and rested. I felt like I'd been grazing and drinking for a long time, and now I had limitless energy. Next to me, Harith's old camel was racing too. She looked more like a horse than a camel. It wasn't long before we arrived at the tent of Harith and Halima. As soon as we got home, our luck started to change. Before we left for Mecca, we hadn't had a drop of rain for months. The ground was dry, with no grass for me to graze. But when we returned, the sky was dark with clouds, which rained down on us, watering us and the dry earth, and making the ground green with delicious grass. In fact, when we returned, everything changed. The ground, the sky, the weather, the people, the sheep, even the tent got better. All of these blessings since the baby Muhammad came to live with us. Halima and Harith were over the moon. In the past, she could hardly find enough milk to feed her own child, but now she had enough milk for her own child, the baby Muhammad, and more besides. She was very grateful that she'd been blessed, and her life had gone from one of being hard and full of hardships to one of luxury. Halima rode on my back many times, but my happiest moments were when the baby Muhammad would ride with her. Whenever he was with us, even if I rode out into the desert in the midday sun, I wouldn't feel the burning heat, as there would be a cloud in the sky protecting him from the sun's rays. When Muhammad turned 2 years old, he became too old for breastfeeding, and it was time for Halima to return him to his mother Amina. Halima rode my back with the young Muhammad, and we travelled together back to Mecca. I was sad to take Muhammad back, and Halima stayed quiet throughout the whole journey, lost in her thoughts. When we finally reached Mecca and the house of the family of Muhammad, Halima dismounted with the young child and took him to meet his mother. I was waiting outside, but I could hear the sound of Halima's voice from inside the house. She was pleading with Lady Amina, pleading for Muhammad to stay with her for longer. She went on and on until finally Lady Amina's heart gave way and she allowed Muhammad to return back with us to our tent in the desert. I was so happy to be returning back with Muhammad. I ran back home so fast that everyone who saw me couldn't believe I was the donkey of Halima. Harith couldn't believe his eyes when he saw us. Muhammad has returned to us? No sooner did Muhammad return to us than our good fortune and blessing continued once more. We were all very happy, and our days passed like this for many months. One day, one of Halima's sons came running over to us, screaming and shouting. Two men came, wearing white clothes, bright white clothes, and they took my brother Muhammad. Harith cried out in disbelief. They took Muhammad? And he's so gentle and quiet? And it's us who are responsible for his safety? The young boy continued. One of them opened Muhammad's chest. while the others searched inside it for something and removed it. Then the two men just got up and left. Halima and her husband began running, searching for Muhammad. I ran right after them to see what had become of our dear Muhammad. And then we found him, standing peacefully, smiling sweetly back at us. This strange incident really scared Halim and Harith, and they decided that they needed to return Muhammad back to his family. So this time, Muhammad left us for good. But the good fortune and blessings that he brought with him stayed behind. He had brought joy and happiness to our home, and that joy and happiness only increased when we learned the story of the two men, for they were two angels that Allah had sent, who had come to wash the heart of Muhammad and purify it in preparation for it to carry the great message, the message of Islam.